Alright, it is quite late in the day, and I finished this quite a bit earlier, but I waited for my phone to charge and I was doing other things. But earlier today, I finished reading Carre's, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I think it's French, The Russia House. This was a book that, maybe for the first time in a really long time, that I've gone in to a book with absolutely no understanding of what it might be, because this book was either my father's or my mother's at some point, and has no book jacket. It has none of the synopsis or reviews or anything like that. So, and it's a book that I have never read or heard talked about outside of this, right? So it's really my first time in a very long time going into a book with absolutely no expectation of what it is. And it turns out it is a spy thriller novel, right? It's a fun little thriller novel. It basically mostly revolves around the idea of late Cold War Russia and how we were so desperate as Americans for information that we were willing to do whatever it might take, including what is shown in The Russia House, which is put an English publisher who is a drunkard and a womanizer and is effectively the worst parts of the James Bond character, and then put him and force him to be a spy, right? That's really what the focus is on, is this kind of singular character, where if you were to take all these poor aspects of the James Bond character and say, okay, he has all these, but he doesn't have the same ruthless quality that we would expect from a spy, what do we get? And then we get this character, right? So that's the main focus of it. The story is pretty generic. There's not a whole lot there. Really, what's most interesting to me is, number one, how it's set up, I guess I should say, because it's set up in a way in which we have two different perspectives. We have a third person perspective, and we have first person perspective, because the story is being told by de Palfrey, who is effectively the lawyer for this group of spies, right? And he's the one that kind of gets put in unofficial charge of a whole slew of things that isn't fieldwork stuff, right? And he ends up being the last one to contact the publisher spy before he goes completely dark. And so we have this weird story in which we have sections of it that are written in third person that are about the spy, and then we have sections that are written in first person, which are the pieces that de Palfrey experienced directly, right? So an interesting little thing there. And what's really more interesting about the story to me in general is the parts in which de Palfrey focuses on the political ramification and aspects of the agencies that are going on, because the spy story itself, right, that whole portion of it is pretty cut and dry and standard, right? To me, there's not a lot of new interesting ideas presented there. What's really interesting to me is they're in the background of all these conversations and about this new information that's being released, right? We have this constant thinking about politics and the way that it affects chain of supplies and power structures and things like that. Because what the information that is given to the spies effectively is that a Russian scientist is admitting that everything that the USSR oligarchs know and understand, and leadership knows and understands about their weaponry, has all been falsified, and that in reality none of it works, or if it works, it doesn't work accurately. It will work sporadically. And so it is dealing with how the English, who become a second-rate power, and then the Americans are fighting this war of power and structure, right? Between these two countries of who gets to take the lead here, who gets to really be the powerhouse here, and whose information is really whose. But then also dealing with the fact that if this is the reality of it, and in reality USSR is not actually functional, then what in the world have the other spies been seeing this entire time? And has the arm race that has been happening, right, that we now understand as the Cold War, has that been entirely pointless and useless, that we've spent trillions of dollars for no reason, right? And to me, that's the way more interesting portion of this, right? Which I know is really background stuff, but yeah, right. I think it is a side of war and a side of espionage that doesn't get discussed about enough, right? And I think that it goes back to this whole like James Bond type character, right? And even in like, police procedural dramas, right? We're so interested in this idea of the rogue solvent that somehow fixes things, right? It's why there's a consistent fascination with stories and shows that are based along the same premises as Sherlock Holmes, right? Of where you have this one rogue character that acts against everyone else's will and things like that, right? Or just gets to act independently of everything else. And within that, right, we see and we have this love and enjoyment of seeing this one individual stand against the rest. But what we usually don't see is how does this one person end up affecting the structure as a whole, right? Is this an anomaly, or is this not something that has to be dealt with and changed in the future? And when it comes to very large things like the Cold War, USSR, and the arms race, do we then react to the single person, or must we admit and sacrifice some dignity in order to not mess things up in the long term, right? So that's that. That's The Russia House by John Le Carre. Good, fun book. But yeah.